joins. We have Are we all set? Okay, great. Well, good evening and welcome to the Norwalk Common Council Ad Hoc Affordable Housing Committee meeting for today, Wednesday, June 22nd beginning at 6:06 p.m. On the call, we have with us Council Member Nicole Ayers is with us. Myself, Greg Burnett, Council Person Jen McMurr, Councilperson Nora Najelski-Eichner, and Councilperson Diana Revolus. So we have a quorum to start the meeting. The third item in the agenda, which was sent out and posted electronically, is approval of the April 27th, 2020 meeting minutes. Does anyone have any additions, deletions, or corrections? I have a couple. First, on page 1, the last paragraph, it indicates Attorney Callahan presented the ordinance in draft form to establish an affordable housing committee. It should read Affordable Housing Trust Committee. On page 2,
Excuse me, through the chair. Hi,
yes.
Sharon. Greg, did you say trust? T-R-U-S-T?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
The fifth paragraph on page 2, the correct spelling of Nora's last name is E-I-C-H-N-E-R. And then finally, on page 3, the first paragraph, it says, Mr. Grant, and I'm not sure who Mr. Grant is. I believe that might have been a question I asked in terms of the time frame to spend the funds. So let's just replace that with change Grant to Burnett. Those are the only 3 that I have. Did anyone else have anything else? Changes, deletions?
Mr. Chair, I was
Greg,
trying to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thank you for catching my name. The first part of my last name also, it's N-I-E instead of E-I in the same.
Okay.
It's correct in the attendee list. So
right. Oh yes, I mean, yeah, you're right. I missed that.
I just had a correction. I'm looking for my correction, but I cannot see it. But my name was spelled incorrect. It's Nicol. There's no E on my name, and I thought I saw it on this document, and I just cannot find it at this moment. If I find it, I'll send you email, Mr. Chair.
it's in the attendance.
I knew I saw it. I couldn't find it. Okay, so my first name is spelled incorrectly.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, it is. So to Telesco Services, that's another correction of the name.
No problem. Thank you, Greg.
Great. Well, so with that, do we have a motion to approve the minutes as corrected? All right, Councilperson Nora Najelski-Eichner. We've gone through the discussion. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, show by the sign of aye or raising of your hand. Okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. All those opposed, any abstentions?
I would like to abstain, Chair.
Great, thank you. So the minutes are approved with the necessary corrections. Moving on to public participation. Do we have anyone signed on with the hand raised who wishes to speak at this time?
Yes, we have one person with their hand raised at the moment, and I can bring them over to speak if you'd like.
Great. Yes, thank you very much.
Diane Lauricella, you just have to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Chairman and Committee. For the record, my name is Diane Lauricella, and I'm speaking to the item related to the plan, the Affordable Housing Plan, RFP. A little bird kind of told me that maybe that person is already, that company may have already been selected, but if not, I just wanted this committee to consider having citizens, especially citizens that are in need of affordable housing, or their representatives, to sit on the selection committee. So we are assured that the company hired thinks outside the box. There are many options now for affordable housing, truly affordable housing in neighborhoods all around Norwalk. And then related to that, I just wanted to bring to your attention an upcoming Planning and Zoning Commission meeting related to this, related to Public Act 21-29. It was an enabling legislation that I hope all of you look up online with the state legislature. It was passed this session. It contains many items, many things, including mandating training for planning and zoning commissioners, but also it included many things related to amending our planning and zoning regulations about affordable housing, and whether we can opt in or opt out. The only reason I'm bringing this up is I've understood from the planning and zoning staff working on this, especially Mr. Brian Baker, that there are some new draft amendments. Currently, the commission has asked to opt out. It next is coming before all of you. The council, by a 2/3 vote, must agree or disagree with the Planning and Zoning Commission to opt in or opt out. So I'm sure it's going to be in your packet soon. I ask that you consider opting in. They voted to opt out. However, at the very least, I'm very happy that if we opt out, there are movements afoot to quickly amend our accessory dwelling unit zoning regulations. But the thing is, when you listen to how they're talking about it, we have only had 269 or 70 accessory dwelling units attached since 1984. There's a reason why that's all in a city of this size. I was shocked, as were the staff. It's because the standards were so tight, so restrictive. I know the intent is to free up some of the restrictive regulation, but from the comments made by select commissioners of planning and zoning, they are going to continue some of this utterly restrictive. And the reason I'm bringing it before you is there are now a lot of new accessory dwelling unit, detached tiny homes, manufactured homes. There's a whole new world of very attractive accessory dwelling units, greater than 600 square feet, maybe not the 1,000 that the state allows us to, but not 600. So I just ask that you look for this plan, these amendments that Brian Baker could send you, and that this committee rather, consider having it on your agenda next month, or at least sending comments, even individually, because you are our voice, those of us that really need truly affordable housing. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Diane. Do we have anyone else that has their hand raised or wishes to speak who is attending from the public?
Does not look like I see any other hands raised at this moment.
Okay, great. Do we have any members of the ad hoc committee that might have received any correspondence from the public which they wish to share at this time? Okay, seeing none. At this time, we'll close public participation. Thank you. And we'll move on to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. The draft ordinance was sent around after our last meeting where we discussed the current draft and we made some changes based upon that discussion. We also have Attorney Darren Callahan on the call with us tonight. Should there be any additional questions or changes? I see one change, which is in paragraph 3, and it's just a minor, very minor change in that the first sentence, which reads, "The mayor shall appoint an affordable housing trust committee consisting of 5 members." We need to change 5 to 7. And then the paragraph goes on to outline the 7 members of the committee. So that just changing the number 5 to 7.
I just read,
I'm sorry.
Councilman, I just redlined that into the working document.
Great, thank you. If did anyone else have any other question? I see Council Member Nora Najelski-Eitner has a hand raised. Nora, any question, comment, etc.?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Last night, 2 nights ago at the Ordinance Committee meeting, we were speaking about the cannabis account, which is a similar structure to this one. And apparently it had been determined that referring to it as a trust account was not the best terminology. And Darren, I don't know if you were involved in those conversations or have anything to weigh in on that. But I just, again, I think as we're striving to keep our ordinances as consistent as possible across the various sections of the code, if that is in fact correct, I believe the cannabis one, we simply dropped trust, so that just became so this would perhaps just become the affordable housing account. I'm not sure. Anyway, Darren, if you have thoughts on that, but I just wanted to raise it.
I think that makes sense. I mean, I think that, that's, we should definitely be consistent between the ordinances, and it would just be a deletion of one word. So I'll make that, I'll redline that change into the current working version and circulate it.
Just curious, was there a rationale behind why dropping the word trust from the ordinance? Was any discussion around that?
Darren may have further, as I understood it, trust has a particular sort of legal set of meanings. And I think Mr. Livingston and Mr. Goldstein had discussed that what we're doing is not really a trust. And so that it might be confusing to have that terminology. But again, Darren, there was not a substantial amount of discussion. So if you've got further comment.
Yeah, I think it is a practical and logical approach. It generally, when one thinks of a trust, they think of an instrument that creates a statutory it's a statutory instrument that creates what's known as a trust, and it does have a legal connotation to it. So I understand the logic behind it. I think it makes perfect sense to make the change so that there's no confusion, given the conventional use of the word.
Okay.
At the end of the day, it's whether you call it a trust account or a special account. What the statute does, whatever you call it, it creates a non-lapsing account. That's ultimately what the statute, how it operates.
Okay. On this particular item related to trust, are there any other questions? Is everyone comfortable with removing the word trust? Okay, great. So we'll make that adjustment. Council member Nicole Ayers, your hand raised.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question in my perusing of this document, and it might be me not fully grasping what the document is saying, but I was looking for a particular language or recommendation to ensure that affordable housing would be throughout the city and not in a particular geographic area or pocket. I don't know if this is the proper place to insert that type of language, but I think it's beneficial from a city development and city growing plan to make sure that affordable housing is throughout the city.
I guess my thinking around that would be, this document does not define where affordable housing is. It does define in the first paragraph what the term affordable housing means, which could be anywhere within the city of Norwalk. I don't know if this is the right. Yeah, I don't know if this is the right instrument to define where affordable housing would be. If that's your point, yeah.
My concern is that in the distribution of this fund, can we call it a fund since we're not saying trust? In the distribution of this fund or allocation of money, I think we need to give some guidance, if at all possible, to diversify where these things are going, where these affordable housing opportunities are going, and what they look like. I think that would be a good lens for us to sit in. Now, if you're saying that this is not the document, I think it is the document because it's tied to money. And so if people are going to be recipients of this money, and it might not be me fully understanding this purpose, but I think I do. I think it would be smart for us to kind of give some friendly language in directing that we don't want we want affordable housing throughout all neighborhoods and throughout the city.
I would actually think that would be guidance that we would give to the Affordable Housing Committee once the committee is formed, not so much in the ordinance, but the committee that will be reviewing the applications and making recommendations to the council as to how money will be distributed. That would be the place to provide that level of direction, as opposed to in the ordinance itself. Because that's where, for lack of a better term, the rubber really meets the road. When applications come in from across the city and the committee that we're defining in the ordinance begins to do their due diligence and review and research, and then they make the recommendation to the council in terms of how much and where dollars should be distributed, that's where the direction that you're pointing out should go to that committee in terms of their approach to reviewing applications.
So are we
That's
supposed
my
to,
thought. Yeah.
and I'm just,
Mhm.
are we supposed to then, because we are not the direct body that will be dispersing the money,
Correct.
are we going to we're just giving recommendation, or are we going to give oversight to that formalized body? Because how I read the document currently, I'm missing that type of language. It might be in there and I'm not picking it up, but I'm missing that language, that the committee will be receiving recommendations or oversight, whatever language that we're choosing to use to direct their work, I guess I should say.
So maybe I can jump in here, Councilman Burnett.
Yes, sure.
So mechanically, the way it's designed, just breaking it down kind of in broad brush, is at a staff level, the processes and procedures for applying for use are set by guidelines created by the Planning and Zoning Department. It's kind of the procedural component, the non-substantive component, but the actual application itself resides in the committee that's created by this, what would be created by this ordinance, to review the application and to make a determination of whether the application warrants the use of the funds and to what extent, and on what conditions should be imposed. But that ultimately that committee's jurisdiction is one of making a recommendation, and it would then be moved on to a subcommittee of the Common Council as it's currently designed. It would be the Finance Committee. So it would originate before the Common Council as a recommendation initially in the Finance Committee of the Common Council, and then ultimately to the full council. So ultimately the council will have final say or veto power over the use of the funds. And the way it's designed is the council could reject the particular use. It could modify the use. It could set additional conditions on the use from what the initial recommendation was.
Can I jump in as well? Follow up on that?
Yes, sure.
Okay. So, because I am picking up on a lot of what Nicole's saying, and I think doing this in tandem with the cannabis account, it's sort of a cyclical, like we talked about things with cannabis the other night that have now gotten me thinking about things about the structure here that I hadn't thought of before. So I have a couple of thoughts. One is, to Nicole's point, we haven't drafted the preamble yet. There's a placeholder for it. And I think that Nicole's original point about our intent and our hope that this fund is used to make sure that affordable housing is developed throughout Norwalk, the preamble might be an appropriate place for a sentiment like that, because I think that is more of sort of a vision kind of issue that I think is a statement worth making. So I would certainly support considering that for the preamble. My further thought, based on some of the back and forth in the cannabis conversation, Darren, is that I do think it might be helpful to have the committee have a specific authorization to review the guidelines and provide feedback to the planning and zoning director on the guidelines themselves. Because I don't want to set up a situation where an applicant, responds to the guidelines, puts in an application, and then gets to the committee, and the committee is unhappy, not necessarily with the application per se, but that the fundamental issues was that the guidelines themselves that the applicant was working on were not in fact what the committee thinks are sort of the best purpose. So I think, and there's some implicit implication in there that the committee would review and comment on the guidelines or potentially have that, but I think we might want to make that explicit. And there was further conversation in the cannabis context around the similar cannabis guidelines that perhaps the council should also have the ability to comment on the guidelines, again, to prohibit or to prevent a situation where an applicant in good faith follows the guidelines, and by the time it finally gets to the council's concern is not really with the applicant, but with the guidelines. Now, I think the cannabis situation is different in that I'm not sure that there is going to be a cannabis committee in the same way that there is an affordable housing committee here. And I don't want to add too many layers of review either, but I do think that someone, whether it's the committee or the council, should have the ability to review the guidelines before they're implemented, to sort of maintain that citizen and community commentary and not just have the initial guidelines be developed by the staff. And Nicole, I think I'm sharing some of your same concerns, or I think that reflects some of the concerns you were having, but correct me if I'm wrong about that.
I share what you're saying. I think my root concern is in a city planning, city development frame of mind. Historically, when in Norwalk, when we said affordable, we meant South Norwalk. I'm just going to put it out there. Affordable was designated to a certain location, a demographic location in our city. I do not think that is fair. I don't think that's equality or equitable. I think we should have affordable housing in South Norwalk, in Rowayton, in North Norwalk. I think affordable housing needs to be everywhere. So my concern with not giving the commission or the committee any language around that might not happen. We are then gonna only put it in one location. But I do concur and agree with what you said. I think that's a farther thought. But my initial gut in reading this document as it lives right now is that we need to say we need it to be throughout the city. Am I making sense?
No, I completely agree. And I guess, so on that initial point, do you think putting it in the preamble is sufficient, or do you think that we should?
It just needs to be in the document. So in the preamble, I don't have a problem with that. I think it needs to be explicitly stated that Norwalk sees affordable housing everywhere. I tell everybody, I'm not dying in the seat. So I can't speak and think about people who are going to come behind me. So the best I can do while I'm in this seat is give good wording in legislation to guide my thoughts 5, 10, 15 years in the future. And that's why I wanted to bring it up to this body tonight.
No, that makes total sense to me. And I think, and it is a fair point too, if there is other guidance, sort of big conceptual guidance that we want to convey to this committee. And I think it is, as Greg, as Chairman Burnett said, right, it is, we don't want to be tying their hands. The whole point of this committee is to have them be able to sort of respond. But I do agree that if there's sort of kind of philosophical direction that we want to convey, that's often what a preamble is for. And that might be really helpful here. Because I completely agree with you on the larger point, and it is a message that is an important message to send. So I would be open to amendments like that, and I don't want to lose then my further point. I do think that some guideline review is in keeping with that intent, just to make sure, not any disrespect to the staff, but the whole point of having a citizen committee. And I feel like you want their comments on the front end and on the back end. Otherwise, you run the risk of slowing down the process ultimately, from my perspective.
Okay, so just to circle the wagons a little bit. So instead of the guidelines being adopted at the staff by the director of planning and zoning, they would be adopted by the common council or the committee. I think the way the ordinance was originally drafted and submitted, it was designed that it would be adopted by the common council, and I think there was some debate of whether it should be more flexible and it should be in the discretion of the staff. I think it could be. I think you could really do it anywhere. It could be the guidelines could be adopted by the committee. It could it could be the common council. It could be a periodic review. For example, the purchasing guidelines are supposed to be reviewed, are adopted by the council and required to be reviewed and revised and amended, or readopted at least every over a specific period or cycle. I think it's every 4 years or 8 years or something like that. So there's a lot of flexibility here on how that can be designed.
Yeah, and I bring this up to the committee because I would love people's perspective. I think my inclination would be to put it with this committee we're creating, because again, we don't want to create a committee and then deprive it of all sort of authority and job, right? There's no sense in having a committee and having them have nothing to do. And I don't know that it needs to come to the council if we're confident that the committee is focused on it. That said, there's, like I said, I also fear since the application does have to come to the committee, or does have to come to the council, if the council members have issues, I just don't want issues to be raised at the stage where the applicant has already gone through all the work. I want to make sure that the issues come up before that happens. So that would be the only countervailing to have it only go through the committee. I don't know, Diana, I know you've got your hand up, and I'm very open to, I'm curious about other people's thoughts.
Councilmember Diana Revelous.
My question is not towards that, but in what I brought up before, which I saw the I don't remember talking about any green initiative. What I want to see is there's no language in affordable ownership, whether it be homes, condos, co-ops in any part of Norwalk. And I think that's really important for that language and funding to actually be designated to affordable home ownership and looking at programs that would work and suffice in that, especially to strengthen our community and our lower hanging fruits, for lack of better words. Do you guys see a space and place for this? Because affordable housing puts a cap on people. It's just basically being a tenant. And we need more than tenants. We need ownership for stronger taxpayers here. That would strengthen our schools, so on and so forth. So I'm just going to bring that back in that verbiage of not only affordable housing, but can we please have affordable home ownership and some type of model program or something of thought for that committee as well.
That's an excellent point. I guess the question is, should that apply to this ordinance, which is focused on providing this account to focus on constructing, rehabilitating, and repairing affordable housing properties? Home ownership.
Those properties, though, could, again, I stress that it could be co-ops, it could be condos, as long as it gives a space and place for ownership, that would be helpful. You can't pass down affordable rent. You know what I mean? And again, it doesn't always have to look like a house, even though I would love that to be it. But we can also look into these developments being condos or co-ops or something that is in that affordable range.
Good point. I just and Attorney Callahan, maybe, you know, I would welcome your input. Would that be viewed kind of as a separate track from this account? Because that entails a whole different set of terms and conditions, guidelines as it relates to home ownership and assisting in home ownership, as opposed to this account, which is somewhat earmarked for construction, rehabilitation, and repair.
Yeah, it would definitely at a minimum require they are two different tracks to a large degree. How you would design I think the ordinance, or if it was going to be in this ordinance, it would need to be built out quite a bit differently than the way it currently is. It's certainly achievable. One of the considerations is, you're trying to, and this is really on the policy side, but whenever you have tax incentives or accounts or some other mechanism to spur development for affordable housing, you usually, what you're trying to do is to put as much affordable housing into the into the housing stream as possible, and to a certain extent and invite development in that area. And I think that's probably in concept where they started with construction, rehabilitation, and repair. Certainly, repair could be, on an existing home that is owned and occupied for affordable housing. Occupied in a manner that meets the affordable housing definition. But if the concept is more of acquiring a house, kind of like a mortgage program, this ordinance is not really designed for that.
So I just want to step you again outside of just a house. Like, for example, the development right next to the train station, I'm just forgetting the names. Those are co-ops. So it would be like repair of areas that you have multiple units that fall under affordability, but is not just limited to being a tenant, but having these people have ownership within it. So I think just our mindset, especially in a time when we're coming to a housing crisis, that we can strengthen this by also giving a lane and space that gives ownership back to it. It doesn't always have to be a 3-bedroom house. It can be, again, a co-op or a condo developed in a situation that looks like the buildings right next door from the train station, something of, or even let's say something that looks like Colonial Village, and it's renovation, but now we're making it co-ops, not just tenants or rental. That's what I'm saying. Like, if we expand our mind a little bit to put a sector in this that allows that a little bit more. We had that in Norwalk, we're losing that. And I'm just hoping that there is a lane somewhere in here that can help in providing and facilitating that, not only in South Norwalk, but then also those type of things could then be seen again on Wall Street or Rowayton or Connecticut Avenue, so on and so forth.
So I now thank you for further fleshing that out. And now I get exactly what the point is. So I do think it does touch. It currently does touch on that. So whether the developer is constructing, the affordable housing for rental or for ownership, that's just part of the application process. So the committee may say, we're going to pass on the developer who is, proposing constructing affordable housing for renting. And when we have another developer that's, ready and willing to develop affordable housing for ownership, this ordinance can do that.
Awesome.
I'm sorry.
No, I said awesome. Awesome.
Okay.
Keep going. Sorry.
It definitely hits that. Where I think, and this is where I got a little confused, is where it does diverge a little bit, is I think it's possible to do. You could create like a lending program or a funding program for just purely for assistance of first-time home buyers, or to acquire a house from in the open market, so that they can acquire housing that they otherwise would be priced out of. It doesn't do that. It could be done. Absolutely. Is this the right instrument for it? I don't know. It's hard to. I'm not sure I can answer that. On the spot.
Okay.
But it's certainly achievable, whether it's in this ordinance or in another format. It's achievable.
Okay. Thank you so much. If we could look into it just a little bit, I would really appreciate it. And thank you for your response.
Sure. Thank you.
Council Member Jen McMurray.
Nora, did you want to go first since you had your hand up first?
Oh, did you? I'm sorry. I didn't.
That's okay. I was going to comment on what you said before and circle back around. So I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Yeah, go for it. I've talked a lot.
Okay, no problem. I mean, I just didn't want to cut you off. I was going to say, I agree with what Diana is saying, or Councilmember Revolus is saying about ownership, because I know that she talks about that a lot, and that's something that I'm in favor of as well. We want people to put roots down here, and the only way for us to really do that is to offer up affordable ownership. in whatever way we possibly can. So even if it's not in this ordinance, which I understand it may not be the best place because we're talking about this account specifically, but I do think that we need to continue that conversation for sure. And then to circle back on what Councilmember Najelski-Eichner had said about the committee and the council, I think that Darren, you had mentioned a periodic review could be possible as well. And I think that's probably something that we should add in, whether it's by the council or the committee. But you know, you just never know what the future holds, like Councilmember Ayers said. And I think that a periodic review of anything like this is always really important to do.
Sure. So what I could build into the ordinance for, to develop the conversation is that to make an obligation upon the department, the staff, to propose updated guidelines on a periodic basis. And then ultimately what those guidelines look like and are adopted would be a discussion topic for the committee to coalesce on. It'd probably be the tidiest way to do it.
I like tidy. Thank you.
Okay.
Let's see, Councilperson Nora Najelski-Eichner.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. And I think tying a couple of these things together. So Darren, I really appreciate the clarification about the purposes of this, because that was actually one of the things I was going to say. I don't see anything in here that would prohibit the use of these funds to build or rehab affordable owned properties, right? I think that it's just that our intent, and I think Chair Burnett was very clear about this from the beginning, that our real hope was to make sure these funds were dedicated for the hard costs of construction, because that is such the barrier in so many ways to these programs, or to these to this affordable construction happening. So I would be in favor, again, returning to the preamble, I would be in favor of a preamble that, to Councilwoman Ayers and Councilmember Leverlus's points, talked about, our commitment to building affordable housing throughout the city, to building affordable housing that included both rental properties and home ownership properties. And I think Councilmember Revolus had also mentioned briefly our commitment to building green. And I feel like, again, the preamble would be an appropriate place to set out, three sort of philosophical visionary objectives that would guide the work of the Planning and Zoning Department in the guidelines and the committee in the guidelines, but would leave an enormous amount of flexibility within that for them to actually create, what does that look like in this given year? What are we seeking in this application? Those would be certainly more aspirational. And that's often what I feel like a preamble is for. So that would be a proposal that I would put forward to kind of build on those ideas. And I do think it's important, to Councilmember Revolus's point, to make it clear to Planning and Zoning and the committee that this money can be used for ownership, as long as it's being used to build the buildings that then would become, buildings for ownership. And I can imagine, I know this is a complicated topic, but I can imagine then, for instance, the guidelines for that year then having requirements in them as to how the homeowner might then have an obligation to return some funds to the account when they sell the property next. Or, there's different ways that I know this has been handled in multiple places, so that, there's not a sense that one person is kind of getting a windfall from the city because they do get to own the property then. And so that sort of changes the dynamics. But that feels to me like the kind of thing that could be handled in the guidelines. This is more of a sort of just pointing out that it is allowed, and that we would expect Planning and Zoning to figure out the mechanics of how this could be done fairly. So I don't know, that's my take on it. I would be very supportive of an approach like that. I do think it would reflect the values this committee has really put forward.
I like that
Yeah,
idea.
I just to kind of emphasize those points. So, for example, well, there's only a handful of towns that have actually taken this step. So we're definitely on the leading side of this. But other towns that have, they've chose to do it in different ways. But for example, as far as repurposing the money or making the most of these funds. For example, Fairfield does it as a loan program so that the account gets replenished. Now that may not be the best format, and then they do it as part of the guidelines. So that may not be the best format for Norwalk. Maybe the format is some sort of real estate instrument that requires some repayment upon sale on some sliding scale. But the larger point is that the guidelines really can be created to achieve any of these results. And I think some of the wisdom of having and not setting everything forth in the ordinance, but having some written guidelines as it allows for, kind of flexibility over time to learn from, how what kind of applications are getting submitted, what the level of interest is, how to generate, more affordable housing from in light of the amount of funds that are being invested in the account, and so forth and so on. But there's a lot of ways it can be done.
Councilmember Nicole Ayers.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say something really great, I promise you. But after Nora said what she said, it made me rethink for a minute. But I really was going to wow you. I guarantee it was going to be a whopper. I think that I'm okay with the ordinance as being written with the minor adjustments that we've spoken about tonight. I'm okay with the preamble and having it divided in kind of 3 areas of focus. My concern is we want this money to stretch as long as we could possibly get this stretch. What is the thought? And we might not need to discuss that tonight. What is the thought to keep more money coming in to this fund? Because one thing that we have not touched on, and I think that everything that was brought up in this conversation is really important, and we right where we need to be. But again, looking at our city and knowing that this is an intergenerational city, we as a city have not done our best when it comes to elder care and elders and housing. We have not done our best. I'll leave that there. And I think that in the vein of affordable housing, that is aligned with elder housing, because some people at a certain age, they no longer want to stay in their home, but they don't have options to go to a smaller home or a condo or something of that nature. And so again, Chair, if we can kind of put that as an agenda item to talk about later, 1, the replenishing of this fund, and 2, how can we prioritize elder housing under the scope of affordable housing? I think we kind of play a part in the housing market. If people are not moving out of their housing and we're not getting no extra land, where can we put these housing? I mean, we get tons of calls, complaints, emails about the buildings are too big and the buildings are too long and it's too many units. And we do our very best to problem solve those things. But I think we need to be a lot more creative. We need to look into tiny homes. I've said this to my colleagues before. We need to look into tiny homes. That is a way of home ownership. And that is a way of maybe getting some people out of big, larger homes when they had a larger family into a more condensed place and location. And tiny homes might be more favorable to certain neighborhoods in our city that are less industrial and don't want the bigger kind of boxier locations. So I wanted to put that down. And lastly, I wanted to say, the work that we're doing here is groundbreaking work. I know Darian noted that other towns are doing it, but I guarantee you they're not doing it the way Norwalk is doing it, because this committee has been very intentional and the members of this committee really are passionate about affordable housing and all of the nuances and the different looks of affordable housing. I do not want to tie the hands of the committee or the commission that's going to be doing this work. But I have to say, I would like to work on the guidelines a little bit more to be very intentional of what our expectations of the work is to be done. And I do think we should be able as a council to review those guidelines in a 3-year period. Every 3 years or so, let's look at these guidelines to make sure that they are lining up with the scope and the need of the city.
Can I just jump on something Ms. Ayers said, in particularly with elders? And this is part of, first of all, I'm so for tiny homes too, or good trailers. Secondly, why in particularly too about the housing crisis? One of the things that families are losing when elderly lose their home is equity in their family generationally, especially in the Black community. That's why I'm saying with affordable ownership where it looks like a condo or a co-op, it removes the need to, you have maintenance that takes care of the land, that will mow your lawn, that will, remove your garbage. And these are the things that cause elderly to want to downsize because they have too much responsibilities in their homes, whether even if their fridge goes out, they have someone to call to help. This is also part of why I want to converse about this in this scope, because it still gives equity to the family, but then brings down the responsibilities to an elder community, which is really what's happening a lot now. And then we have children that are in college or millennials that are not being able to find their next step in place because of the amounts that it's costing. So just to double back, even in particularly with elders, this is why something like affordable ownership, but on a smaller scale, would be so helpful, because it gives the responsibility of maintenance for the home to somebody else, but still keeps ownership with them. That's all I wanted to say.
Council member Norman Dejowski.
Thank you, Chair Burnett. And I don't want to speak in advance of anything, but I had a conversation at the MLK corridor events today, which I think resonated with a number of these themes that Ms. Laura Cella's comment also referenced. So my understanding is that there is going to be an accessory dwelling unit ordinance brought to the ordinance committee sometime in the next few months that I hope will very much be part of all these conversations. So I don't have more information than that, but I do think that that's something that we should be very much cognizant of, and I think is in the works with staff for sort of a proposal to be made. And perhaps, should be part of the conversation of this as well. And that's all my information about it, but I do think that it is on the radar. And I think Ms. Laura Cella's comments, my understanding is that it is not that the city is trying to do less than the state allows, but rather we're actually trying to do more. But that may complicate our opting in versus opting out, but it's not a rejection of the proposal. It's actually trying to be more progressive, I believe, but I am not an expert on this, having not yet seen it, so.
Okay, to kind of bring this full circle, I guess the one piece that we need to see at this point is what the preamble will look like and the wording of the preamble. Before we move this forward to the ordinance committee to begin, so they can begin to do their level of work. So is that something, Attorney Callahan, that you can provide a draft to us at some point?
Sure. So I absolutely can provide a draft. So the points that I have so far is that the preamble should touch upon affordable housing geographically, and meaning throughout the entirety of the city. So to be very clear on that. about the effort to build green, and that the intentionality of this is that affordable housing, the development of affordable housing, whether it's construction of new or rehabilitating existing, goes to ownership in addition to adding rental capacity. So adding housing for ownership as well as housing for rental. Those are the concepts that I understand want to be engrafted into the preamble. If there are additional ones, if members of the ad hoc committee would send me an email, and I will interlace those concepts in as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think you captured the essence of all the comments that were made tonight. Great. So, we will, so I will, once Attorney Callahan makes those adjustments, I will recirculate the draft ordinance. My mission is to get it right and not just to get it out. So if I'll recirculate it, we take time to review it and make sure everyone's comfortable with the wording. And if need be, we'll bring it back to the next committee meeting to get full agreement on and a level of comfort on the wording before we bring it to ordinance committee.
So Councilman Burnett, I think it probably would be very beneficial to have this back before the ad hoc committee at least one more time, because there is a number of things that I've been asked to add or develop in this document, at least tentatively plan to do that.
We will definitely bring it back to the ad hoc committee before it goes anywhere. Yes.
Right.
We won't rely just on circulating it via email. We'll bring it back together as a group to review it before it moves anywhere.
Perfect.
Good.
Sure,
Great.
Burnett, I would be willing to volunteer to commit to helping Attorney Callahan if it's helpful in the intermediate to try to do a one round of revisions, if that would be helpful. Since I know I did propose a number of the language issues.
It would be welcome.
Okay, I will be happy to do that.
But it would be welcome for anyone.
Right.
But it would be welcomed, particularly with respect to the preamble. And I really do want to capture what it is that you all want in there. So absolutely, please, if you have the ability and the time, I will make my time available to you.
Awesome. I'll shoot you an email.
Great. Thank you.
Great. And as Attorney Callahan mentioned, if anyone else has any thoughts, please reach out and can be part of that process also.
Yes.
With that, moving on to item 6, which is an update on affordable housing plan RFP. We have with us Michelle. If you can introduce yourself and your role and your involvement with the planning and zoning department, that would be great.
Sure, thanks. I'm Michelle Andreski, new hire for the senior planner position. It was an inside hire. I was previously the land use planner. Now I'm the senior planner. So I've been with the city for roughly about 4 years. So I'm a little familiar, but getting a little bit more knowledge, just sitting in, listening to you guys today is great. And I'm excited to kind of be the liaison for you guys and help you whatever you guys need.
Great. Well, welcome, and we look forward to working with you. With that, as it relates to the Affordable Housing Plan RFP, the RFP did go out. we did receive a minimal number of responses, of which one organization was interviewed. And I believe we're still in the process of deciding whether we're going to go forward with that organization to assist in the creation of the affordable housing plan. Is that correct? I know Steve Kleppen, the P&Z director, was not available to join us tonight, but Michelle, do you have any further update beyond that?
Oh, yeah, that sums up, to my knowledge, the status of the plan at this point.
Great. And I know one of the things that was definitely emphasized was the focus on capturing input from the community as it relates to formulating the affordable housing plan. Beyond just having one or two community meetings, but really making a major effort in terms of capturing the input of several different communities across Norwalk in terms of building the affordable housing plan, and more importantly, building a plan that is very actionable. So we are taking the steps to make a plan that will bring about results, and not just making a plan to say we have a plan, but an actionable plan that can have an impact across Norwalk. So more work is being done in that space. Councilmember Nora Najelski-Eichner.
I just want to clarify, so there were not a lot of bids. You're interviewing one of the bidders. Is the question whether we're going to go forward with that bidder or put it out for bid again? I just wasn't quite clear.
Yes, sure. I believe the intent is to move forward with the organization that was interviewed, to put it out to bid again. There's no guarantee that we would attract more applicants. Several communities across Connecticut are going through this exercise currently. So for us, we appear to be comfortable with this organization, that they can assist us in delivering an actionable, affordable housing plan within the scope of the dollars that we have allocated to build the plan. Which, as you see on the agenda, is $120,000.
Terrific. That's great. So I want to make sure it wasn't that it was a dissatisfaction. It's more of a just we're still in the middle of the process.
No.
Terrific. I'm really glad to hear that.
Any questions as it relates to this particular item? Okay. Moving on, we are still working with the Norwalk Housing Authority to find a date for the committee to visit Colonial Village and the renovations that are taking place. Kind of want to see a present state unit and kind of a renovated unit to get a kind of a comparison of the work that's being done. So working closely with Adam Bovelski to have a date when we can make the visit and be able to have a valuable visit where we can see the renovations that have been done and be able to see what changes have been made. So that is still being worked. I've asked Adam to provide a couple of dates, which we will share with the committee so you can plan your availability. And I think it will be great for us to get out into the community and actually see some of the work that's being done. So that that will be coming up. We're targeting, possibly trying to get this done, have the visit in the August timeframe.
Can it be later August?
Later August?
I'm due early August, so can
Oh.
it be later August? I'm carrying a baby around.
Sounds like a special request that we can definitely honor. So I'll take that back to Adam, that we'll look towards the latter part of August.
Thank you so much.
Okay, if there's no other items or comments to be made, we can move forward and adjourn at this point.
I'll give that motion if needed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Diana Revolus moves the motion to adjourn. All those in favor, show the sign of aye by raising your hand, and it's unanimous. Thank you. Great meeting, great discussion, and I'll see everyone shortly.
Good
Nice
night.
meeting
guys.
All right, take care.
Bye.